Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to the panelists for being here today. Mr. Nally, let me start with you. I'm from Nevada. I was fortunate to be home this past week driving around this state and along with many Nevadans, filling up my gas tank and saw firsthand how Nevadans are paying at the pump right now and how much it is costing. Since 2015, Congress has enacted 8 laws, including the newly signed Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, that have mandated over 350 million barrels of crude oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Additionally, Congress has required the Department of Energy to sell approximately 1.5 billion of crude oil to pay for SPR modernization programs. So, Mr. Nally, can you speak to some of the immediate relief that tapping the Strategic Petroleum Reserve would provide to all Americans right now?
Well, as you said, I mean, the SPRO is a really important resource to the United States. Based on past analysis we've done, our assessment in the current situation is, it would provide temporary relief. What's available, as you just articulated, there are limits to what can be released in a short-term situation. And we did some recent analysis where it looked like somewhere between 15 million barrels to 48 million barrels for a short period of time would bring down the price of crude oil about $2 per barrel, about 5 to 10 cents per at the pump.
So is it reasonable to think that we need some short-term and long-term relief right now?
As you know, EIA is really a policy-neutral organization. I don't want to kind of get into what the policy.
And I appreciate that, and I think that's what I am asking the administration to look at. I know just $6 billion in sales from the SPR was included as a pay-for in the bipartisan infrastructure package. This will provide some relief to so many that are seeing these high gas prices that we're talking about right now, along with the long-term implications and hopefully long-term solutions coming together. We can look to address this. Mr. Nally, are you able to provide an overview of some of the emergency tools that the Department of Energy and Administration has to address extreme problems with the nation's energy supply?
My staff could get back with your staff with that information.
I would appreciate that. Thank you. And then let me just say this, as we've touched on today, the economic costs of climate change are widespread and difficult to predict, making its effects especially dangerous for energy price trends, as we've talked about. Mr. Nally, you ended your written testimony by referencing regional weather events, including the prolonged drought in the western U.S. and how this is impacting short-term generation and fuel sources. Can you elaborate on the impacts that extreme weather and climate change are having on domestic and international energy markets?
I don't know that I can offer you a whole lot, but I mean, there certainly have been situations, as with hurricanes, Hurricane Ida, for example, that came through the Gulf of Mexico and knocked production offline for an extended period of time, Texas freeze that happened. So there's certainly events throughout the country that are inevitable, that happened that have caused energy disruption and price impact.
And Mr. Gould, would you agree with that? And then would you also elaborate? I believe it was in either your written testimony or the answers to some of the conversations we're having here that in some other countries that had renewable energies, the energy prices were lower. Is that correct statement? And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So first to say that we certainly agree that the incidence of extreme weather events is rising, and that's something that needs to be very much on the radar screen of energy policymakers and also energy market analysts. This year we've had droughts in Brazil that caused Brazil to take a lot more LNG from international markets. That's been one of the factors that has increased market tightness this year. So on that first point. The second point regarding the analysis that was released yesterday by the Agency of European Energy Regulators, and it looked at which countries in Europe have seen the largest increase in electricity prices in recent months, looking in particular at the month of September. and it found that the countries that had the largest increase were those with the highest share of natural gas generation and also the most limited interconnections with other countries. The countries that had the smallest increase in electricity prices were those primarily in the Nordic countries that have invested heavily in renewables. I think I mentioned also that one of the other countries that hasn't seen such a large increase in prices was Poland, and that's to do with the relatively large share there of coal-fired generation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Hyde-Smith.